welcome to this episode of the This Is Believeland Real Browns Fans podcast. I am your host, James Mastrucci, and as always, I am joined by Jordan Cohen. Jordan, it's Thursday. We're getting ready for preseason week 2. Are you ready?
I am very ready. I feel like, given all the practice news we've had, it feels like the season's getting closer. I last night watched the new NFL Films thing on the 2020 Browns, and it was really good. Everybody who's listening should go watch it. It's on YouTube. But also, it just made me substantially even more excited than I had been.
Well, that's pretty good. Before we get too into it, quick reminder for everyone out there. Like, subscribe, share, tell your friends about this podcast. Available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Anchor, thisisbelieveland.com, and realbrownsfans.com. I think I've got them all there. Remember, if you don't subscribe, like, and tell your friends and family, that's basically stealing, and that's not cool. Preseason week 2, they're taking on the Giants. Live practices are starting, it looks like about now. Apparently the Giants did get lost down in Berea temporarily, but they're there. So live practices are beginning as they prepare for preseason week 2. What are you really expecting to see out of these practices and preseason game? Because basically my hopes are just no injuries or fights.
Yeah, and I to be fair, I think both Stefanski and Joe Judge are kind of more mature head coaches.
Yeah.
I would be shocked if there was a fight. I think there's a history between Stefanski and the Giants and Judge and the Browns. I think there's a reason these two teams are practicing together.
Yeah.
So I would be shocked.
I mean, Judge and Stefanski have known each other for quite some time, so this isn't like just random, pairing of teams. And it's like, let's just have a practice beforehand. They have a history. They know each other. But basically,
and it's also two teams that very likely won't play each other, right, until ever this season.
Yeah.
And so, if anything, I think it's an opportunity for these two coaches in these practices to try things they may want to use on other teams. I also think the Giants are a really interesting team to be going up against because I don't know if you remember the game last year, but I think that was probably Baker's best game of the season, at least until the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And the Browns won 20-6, but the Giants shut down the Browns' run game.
Yeah.
And so I think this will be interesting. I will be interested to see, given that I think more than likely Chubb and Hunt won't be running, but I'll still be interested to see what the Browns' run game looks like in practice and in the game.
Yeah, and just before we get too far into this, it's important to not try and read too much into what happens in not only preseason games, but practice. I've seen some people going nuts about guys getting burned and stuff. I'm like, it's practice. They're probably running a defensive concept that they're not necessarily familiar with or that they're not good at or trying to improve upon so that when it's time for real game reps, they're ready. So
right.
Just like the offense run stuff that they're not comfortable with, the defense is doing the same thing. So yeah, it's cool that, you see someone get burned, but more often than not, they're doing something that they're not necessarily comfortable with. And when they do get burned or they are getting beat, they're just going to be like, well, there's no point in trying to contest this. Save my energy. Don't get hurt.
Well, so I guess the bigger point I was trying to make, though, is, and I agree, is even though it's going to be the backups, I do feel like if the Browns running game gets shut down again, it means the Giants are doing something, and I think the Giants did really well last year against the outside zone in general, the scheme, not the play type itself. And I do wonder, do they kind of have an answer for it? And if so, how does Stefanski adjust, right? Like, their cornerbacks aren't good enough or weren't good enough last year anyways to be much of a problem, and Baker picked them apart. But I think that against a better defense doing the same thing, that could be scary. So that's more of what I'm interested in.
Oh, yeah, I'm absolutely interested in that, too. But I was just, for all those out there that like to tweet out highlights on Twitter, calm down.
Yeah, well, and it's like, I mean, it happens every year, right? And it's always like, remember the one year the Browns went 4-0 in the preseason?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being excited. Everybody was excited. And then it was like, no, the Browns at that point had a bunch of good depth players, but no real good starters.
Mm-hmm.
So I always try to keep that in mind with preseason, that it's basically depth players fighting for roster spots.
Yeah, you're right. That's what it is, and that's what we're going to see. We're going to see a lot of depth guys trying their best for roster spots, which is why I don't really expect to see much of anything of the starters, really.
Yeah.
If they do play in the actual game, it'll be maybe a series, but I doubt it's even going to be that. Because there's not really I don't want to say there's not a point, but the negatives outweigh the positives for the most part.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, I've always felt like everybody says, "Oh, we learn a lot from the third preseason game." I think that's such a load of crap. I actually think we learn a lot more from the first two preseason games than the third, because in that third game with the starters out there, those series, however many series the starters are out there for,
Mm-hmm.
are the most vanilla playbook, like stuff that would never happen.
Oh yeah, it is very vanilla. It's very basic. A lot of times, it's not even what their real offense is. They're running different variations or very simplified versions of their overall scheme, so you really don't learn that much. It's basically a way for fans to get excited for more than a half a quarter.
Right, right. And I think those schemes actually come out more towards the end of games, right? Where you're like, okay, out of you third stringers that are fighting for roster spots, can you execute what we want to do in game? And it's tough to take much away from it because it's going up against other third and fourth stringers.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, like, part of the enjoyment of preseason is actually watching these guys fighting for roster spots.
Yeah,
right.
Sometimes you see a guy, it's like, oh, that guy's kind of interesting, or that guy looks like he could carve out a spot, and then the other times you have guys where it's like, wow, the fan base is really getting obsessed with this guy. I don't get it.
Well, it's like Davion Davis, right? Like, yeah. I think more than likely Davion Davis does not make the roster, although I think it may be more likely than a few people because I'm not, as you know, I'm not as high on Higgins.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's very unlikely. But what Davion Davis is doing is getting himself a roster spot on another team.
Yes.
And to me, that's just kind of fun to watch.
It is. I mean, there are also the guys that are on the preseason that shine that you never hear from again. Damon Sheehy Giuseppe is one of them.
That's a great one.
I mean, has he even played a snap since that preseason?
I don't think so.
Yeah. So,
I don't.
Funny side note. I remember right after that year in the preseason, after the Browns cut him, I was at a restaurant and I heard someone complaining that they cut him, and I'm like, "Are you kidding?" I'm like, "Are you serious?" It's like, I can't believe they cut Giuseppe. He's going to be so good. I'm like, okay. I mean, let's see. He played for the New York Guardians in the XFL. Oh no, he was drafted by the New York Guardians. Then he's in the Spring League, and currently plays for fan-controlled football.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like, that's what most of it, and it's not that these guys aren't good at what they do. Again,
yeah,
even the guys that never make an NFL roster that just sit around on preseason teams and then go to like the AFL or similar leagues,
mm-hmm.
those guys are still probably better at what they do than 99.9% of the human population would be.
Yes.
It just, they're just not guys that you have any expectation of making an actual roster. But like, to me, also, so that's the fun part of preseason.
Mm-hmm.
The other valuable part of preseason is seeing something like the Browns' backup offensive line just going in and dominating against like a starting defensive line. No matter how vanilla that first series was against Jacksonville, and the first series will be against the Giants, like
mm-hmm.
the Browns' backup offensive line looked really, really good.
And that's really good to see for short term and long term.
Right.
From the team building aspect. If you have an injury during the season, you need to call on one of these guys. It's good to know that, hey, at worst he looked competent, and that's a good starting point for a backup is competence. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a great starting point. And that's to me like it's you don't take away anything from that, right? Like the biggest takeaway we probably have at this point is that if one of the Browns starting offensive linemen gets hurt, we'll be okay.
Yeah, it's not. Oh no, who's coming in now?
Right. Exactly.
Or who the hell is this guy?
Right.
You know,
Right.
the, you
I
know,
mean, like, yeah. Go ahead.
let's say the complete opposite of the Joe Thomas introducing himself to his quarterback scenario.
Right. Right. Exactly. I mean, like, or just a guy named Blake.
Yeah,
Right.
guy named Blake.
Wait. So I have a question for you. This is a sidebar, but like, I did not think he played badly against the Jaguars, but it seems like the common perception is that Blake Hance was not that good, which surprised me because I didn't notice anything bad. Did you?
I didn't see anything that stood out as bad. At the same time, I didn't see anything that said like yo, this guy looked good. In comparison to someone like Michael Dunn who looked good.
Right.
So if we're comparing to Michael Dunn, that's not really fair because Michael Dunn looked good, and guy named Blake Hance really didn't necessarily look good, but he didn't look bad. Which
I mean, to me, Blake Hance is a backup. I think Michael Dunn very likely could be a starter for the Browns next year.
I agree as well. So I mean, looking at that, I mean, it's just. I think people are playing the comparison game, and comparison game always leads to inaccurate perceptions of players. Look at them in a vacuum.
Yeah, for who they are.
For who they are. And it's important to not only do that for just these guys right now, but everyone pretty much in the preseason. Okay? That's the way to evaluate, is evaluate them by themselves. Not compared to everybody else. I mean, it should be for everything all the time, but that's a different conversation to have at a different time. But look at them specifically. Not everyone else. They don't matter.
Right.
This one guy. Guy named Blake was fine. Not spectacular, not terrible. He was fine.
Yeah, he's backup right guard, just like Greg Sinnott was fine for the third string right tackle.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots to talk about Drew Forbes, but I don't know what's going to happen with him.
Oh, I don't think he makes the roster. I think Drew Forbes was a reach pick when they made him. And I think he is listen, I'm not judging him for skipping the year last year. Given the situation my family was in, I probably would have skipped the year too. Mm-hmm. But I think that just in his ability to make not just this roster, but an NFL roster, losing a year was really harmful.
It was. It really was. So that didn't help. Then this is a situation where you look at everybody else. I know I'm backtracking about what I just said, but you look at all the backups on the team already, and they drafted James Hudson. Michael Dunn looks like he's solid. They drafted Nick Harris a year ago. Guy named Blake looks like he's solid. Chris Hubbard's on the team. There's just not a spot.
Right. And, like, honestly, if they're going to keep 11th offensive lineman around, I think it may be Greg Sinnott. Because I at least think he can play kind of in multiple different areas.
I'm with you on that.
And I don't think they will, but I'm just saying if they do.
If they were to go,
Drew Forbes has not shown anything.
And, in considering they were playing a very lackluster Jaguars team last week, and everyone else looked good.
He wasn't going up against their starters. He was going up against the backups.
And, and pretty much everyone else looked good, and I don't necessarily have a good recollection of Drew Forbes doing much of anything.
No. And he has not been doing anything in practice. Like, I know none of this is important, but when you're talking about bubble guys, like, Drew Forbes, I know, was supposedly this, like, really interesting pick because he played at a really small school. Nobody really talked about him, but his numbers were incredible. But I also think Drew Forbes was kind of like just a John Dorsey being a really good scout pick, right? Whereas John Dorsey has made his career basically being really good at drafting guys high and then knowing how to scout for kind of these lower tier guys and making those good picks. I don't think Drew Forbes is a bad pick at the time. I think overall, like, it turns out it may have not been perfect, but it was a move that was very Dorsey-esque. And I think just this is a new regime. I think a guy that needed a lot of coaching already just missed a year of coaching. I think it's kind of unlikely he makes the roster.
I'm with you on that. I'm 100% with you on that. It's just you look at everyone else there. You look at him. It's like unless there's injuries to multiple players, I don't see a path to making it out of the 53-man roster.
Yeah.
As far as what the offense is going to do for the Browns, I know they did something a little bit unexpected last week, something they really didn't do all that much last season. Do you expect more of that just to see, or do you think you're going to revert back to something more what we're used to seeing from their offensive game plan and attack?
Are you referring to like the passing stuff?
I'm just referring to pretty much the passing stuff, but just the overall vibe of the offense seemed a little bit different from not necessarily what we expected. I mean, yeah, they had the zone runs and stuff, but there was something that you brought up in the last episode, and that they use a lot more motion than we're used to seeing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think certain parts of this will be, right? So I think the motion's big. They're doing a lot more kind of, I mean, they're still sticking, or at least in last week. So last year, for all the talk about the Browns doing kind of just these outside zone stretch runs, another big thing the Browns used were counters, like misdirection runs, especially against teams with good defensive tackles, right? Just to get the defensive tackle out of position. So, like, there was something in practice that happened where I think it was Nick Chubb went on a run, got a big gain, and Malik Jackson was like saying like, yeah, or run at me, and was pissed off. And this was from the Kapadia article on The Athletic, and I guess Stefanski was like, I'm not an idiot, run at you. And so like that stuff stayed, and they did a lot of that, but I think there was a lot more motion. I think what they're trying to do is run plays in an offense that will let them decide who does and does not make the roster.
That makes sense.
I think that's going to be a lot more passing, but against this Giants defense. So, like, Patrick Graham, the Giants defensive coordinator, I really he has made Jabril Peppers a really good player. I think it's very likely the Giants could have one of the top 5 defenses in the NFL this year just because he's that good.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Browns know that, which means I think if you're Stefanski, what either you've told Joe Judge or you're just hoping to see are kind of these really unique coverages where your quarterbacks and your offensive line need to make the read ahead of the snap.
Yeah.
And I think even if they're doing kind of vanilla versions of that, my guess is we will see actually a pretty significant amount of passing in this game just to kind of see how it works. And I think they'll try running. But I think things like motion, I mean, Stefanski has never used a lot of motion because the Gary Kubiak branch of that tree is not the biggest on motion.
Yeah.
But I think part of that is that Kubiak branch has never really had a receiver that does that well. And as we talked about last week, now they do. They have 2 of them. So I think it's likely that stays.
Yeah, and from what it sounds like Demetric Felton's going to get a lot more run over the next bit of preseason and practice. Seems like they'll be using him fairly often, and from what it sounds like, a little bit more in the receiver role than running back role, but I'm not mad at that.
No, Felton's role in week 1 is great news for D'Ernest Johnson and awful news for Kadero Hodge and Rashard Higgins. Like, just straight up. Because if he is primarily a receiver that can run the ball, Anthony Schwartz is making the roster, right? Donovan Peoples-Jones, Odell, Jarvis are making the roster. Felton will then make the roster. Those are your top 5 receivers. As we talked about, I think they'll keep 6. Which means one of Higgins or Hodge is gone. And Jake Burns was talking about this on his podcast. But the other thing going for Hodge is that Higgins is probably tradable. Maybe not for a lot. Like, it could be for a 6th or 7th round pick.
Yeah.
But he's tradable, especially as teams start racking up receiver injuries. Whereas Hodge probably isn't. And that they may actually try just to move Higgins. Which I thought was really interesting. I had not thought of that, but given like what we've said where we're not actually sure Higgins is better than Hodge, that could be kind of...
That'd probably be the route to go. I mean, because the way we look at it, I mean, it's pretty simple. It's pretty obvious. Donovan Peoples-Jones is miles ahead of Higgins as a receiver. Okay?
Oh, miles. And frankly, Felton and Schwartz provide things Higgins doesn't.
Exactly. And the things that the 3 guys ahead of him do, they do it better than him. So...
Right. I mean, hey, and we've kind of beat the subject on the
Yeah,
ground
we
before,
have.
but like Higgins and Njoku are kind of doing the same thing out there, right? Like
Hmm.
Higgins is almost like your Jarvis backup. And the question is, can Kadero Hodge be that? Or let me rephrase that. Can Kadero Hodge doing that plus a 7th-round pick outweigh keeping Higgins on the roster?
And I would say yes.
At this point, I would say yes too. But I think that's what they're looking for
Hmm.
in at camp. So I don't remember how exact. Oh, right, Felton. Like I think we're going to see a lot of Felton. I think they're trying to figure out, is Felton the guy that can play Week 1 against the Chiefs?
And I think that they have to. I think they'll figure that out. I think they'll have a pretty good idea that at least one of them it will be available and be able to do that, if not both. Honestly.
Well, and D'Ernest Johnson also looked good. Again, I know it was Jaguars, especially Jaguars backups, but D'Ernest Johnson looked good. D'Ernest Johnson's looked good throughout last year. I don't think keeping him is on the roster is inherently a bad thing. I think he does a lot of what Kareem Hunt does, just in kind of a poor man's version.
Hmm.
Um, and I think just statistically speaking, it's likely Kareem Hunt gets hurt this year. Running backs just like you don't have this many seasons without an injury,
Hmm.
as we saw last year with Chubb,
Yeah.
right? So I think it's very likely we will need that third string running back this year.
Yeah. It's very likely. It's very possible. Speaking of injuries, this is a good segue, good transition here.
Mm-hmm.
Browns have quite a bit of injuries right now. As we mentioned last episode, Ryan Switzer and Steven Carlson both on IR, and because it is done in preseason, there's no designated for return possibility, so they're done for the year.
Mm-hmm.
Going into guys who should play this season, Anthony Schwartz hamstring injury, Grant Delpit hamstring injury, Jamarcus Bradley neck injury. Beckham still hasn't actually done anything besides single individual drills. So there's quite a bit of injuries, but the one I want to focus on right now is Delpit. And this is just rough for him. I
Yeah.
mean, we've been saying this for over a year now, and it's been whatever you get out of him really is a bonus. Expect nothing, whatever you get's a bonus.
Yeah. I mean, I like Delpit. And I've said this, like I think Delpit was a good pick when we got him, but it seems like listen, we're lucky that it seems like Greedy will at least be able to play some snaps this year.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's just luck. Even if it's as a backup cornerback, that's still luck.
Yeah.
Uh, we're in the same boat with Delpit. I,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was much higher on Greedy than I was on Delpit, even though I liked Delpit. Like I loved Greedy.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. Like you have to put that behind you, right?
Yeah.
Like you could have loved these guys all you want. Delpit's probably not going to be ready to go until mid-season now.
Yeah, I mean, because it's not just the injury part. It's getting caught up on the defense. It's getting reps. It's getting just used to playing. Because I mean, he was going to be
Exactly.
like what at best a third safety.
Oh, and yeah,
An
I
absolute
think Ryan
best.
Harrison was the third safety. So depending on how you cut it, I guess maybe he was the second safety. So yeah,
Like an
Delpit,
absolute
yeah,
best.
probably the third.
Because you have Johnson, you have Harrison as your starters, right?
Right. So Delpit would have been the third. Yeah, our depth back there is not good.
No. You look at the other safeties there. It's Sheldrick, Redwine,
Which
Richard.
this injury is the best news for him in a long time.
Oh yeah, the injury to Delpit right now means one of Redwine or Richard LeCount makes the roster.
I think LeCount was always going to. I think
Same.
it's Redwine or
Moffat, maybe?
What's his name?
Javante Moffat. Yeah, you're probably
Yeah,
right on that.
Moffat. I think it's going to be between Redwine and Moffat.
You know what? You're
They
right. You're right
just
on that.
drafted LeCount, and I think he was like a 5th or 6th round pick. Like
was-
I think he's making.
He was a fifth rounder, but I thought maybe they could have like practice squatted him.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. I mean, he also looked really good last week.
Mm-hmm.
Admittedly against 3rd and 4th stringers, but he looked good. Like I think he's going to make it. I just don't think he'll play much this year. But yeah, I think Moffat is probably the guy Redwine's competing with.
Yeah, so one of those two is
by
going
the
to
way,
make the
if
roster.
Redwine can't beat out Javante Moffat, like, oh my God, that was a terrible draft pick.
I mean, I think it was a terrible draft pick regardless, but but that's just That draft pick has just aged horribly. Let's be honest here.
No, listen, I feel bad for Delpit. Like, I do. Everything that's been said about him when you watch him kind of in interviews, he seems like a genuinely good dude. He seems like a nice kid.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the stuff that happens with those types of injuries.
Yeah, I was referring to Redwine, but yeah, I agree with you on Delpit.
Well, Redwine was an awful pick. Like, just, yeah, that pick was just... That last Dorsey draft, I mean, again, like, I got the Drew Forbes pick, I got the Redwine pick when we took them, but that's really not ended up as a good draft.
Yeah, let's take a little trip down memory lane real quick.
He was their first pick in that draft. Mac Wilson, I think, was their third. Sione Takitaki was their second. So I had a conversation on Twitter with somebody that, like, Takitaki, if he were drafted in 2001, is probably an all-pro linebacker.
Probably. So let's see what we got here. We got Greedy Williams, Sione Takitaki, Sheldrick Redwine, Mac Wilson, Austin Seibert. He drafted a kicker. Drew Forbes and Donnie Lewis.
Literally the only redeemable pick in that entire class was Sione Takitaki.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, Mac Wilson, he was not a good pick. Like, I guess for a fourth rounder, like, he's given you some starts, which is better than nothing. He was probably the second best pick in that class. But he's not a good NFL player. Like, the only one that's turned into a good NFL player is Takitaki.
And he's, like, marginal.
Yeah,
overall.
No, he's your strong side linebacker, right? Like, in today's NFL, he is going to play a decent, like, maybe 40 to 45% of the snaps, just based on his position. He'll play against the run downs, and that's what he is, and that's really good. I mean, that's useful, but like, you drafted a strong side, like, run stopping linebacker in the second or the third round. Like, that is really high for that type of player.
It is incredibly high. I mean, and let's be honest, the further we get away from Dorsey drafts, the worse they look, by the way. Not to go down draft hole, and just get stuck into this whole thing, but the year before, Austin Corbett, Chad Thomas, Antonio Callaway, Jannard Avery, Damian Ratley, Simeon Thomas, not on the team anymore.
Wait, who was the first round pick in that?
In what year? 2018?
Well, so 2018 was Baker first, right?
It was Baker and Denzel.
Yeah, so Denzel,
Austin Corbett, and Nick Chubb.
Good picks.
Yeah.
I mean, Baker, I don't know. I'll even give him Baker. Like, is it like, listen, Baker's probably the best Browns quarterback we've had in our lifetime, and regardless of his inconsistencies or mediocrity that I think is there, ultimately, you and I have talked about this. It's probably likely that he's the Browns quarterback for at least the next 5 years.
More than likely.
Maybe not, but just based on kind of
the vibes
where I think the tea leaves are. So, but beyond those three, holy crap, that draft was bad.
That draft was bad. Then, like, the year following was terrible too. I mean,
yeah, it's funny. I always give Dorsey credit for being a good scout, but, like, his best pick was Nick Chubb.
Yeah. Then Denzel Ward.
Yeah, and Denzel Ward. And, I mean, so it's funny, in the Browns, in the NFL Films thing about the 2020 Browns, which, again, everybody should watch, Stefanski does have a line in there where he straight up, like, tells Nick Chubb, "You are the best player in the NFL." Which I think is great.
Yeah, I mean,
I also think it's funny that teams thought we were not going to, or people thought we were not going to extend him.
Yeah.
Sorry to rub that in everybody's faces again. But anyway, yeah, outside of Nick Chubb, like, and Denzel Ward, really, every one of Dorsey's picks, I think, could have been. And also, like, Nick Chubb was a second-round pick. He was a really high second-round pick, but he was a second-round pick. Like, at some point, how do you give that to scouting, or just, like, this person watched college football every Saturday?
And sometimes with the second round pick, it's a little bit of luck.
Yeah.
I mean,
Nick Chubb's incredible. I don't think most NFL people predicted him to be this incredible coming off those major injuries.
They didn't. Everyone was loving them some Sony Michel, and let's see how that's worked out in New England.
Man, I know Nick Chubb isn't this type of guy, which so he doesn't feel this way, but like I'm a little petty. Oh, I would be so petty about that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
would be so petty about that whole thing.
I mean, it would be hard not to, but at the same time, you don't want to look like Josh Rosen, who is currently unemployed again.
Hey, I think you know what the Browns can do? They could trade Kyle Lauletta and then sign Josh Rosen to be the third string.
I mean, that'd be fine. I mean, I
Kyle
wouldn't be rushed to
Lauletta
do
was
it.
drafted in that draft. Who is a better quarterback right now, Kyle Lauletta or Josh Rosen?
It's Kyle Lauletta.
Honestly, it probably is Kyle Lauletta.
It's Kyle Lauletta. I had zero hesitance in saying that it's Kyle Lauletta.
I know, like, there are a lot of just traditional, like, NFL people that viewed things, like, very traditionally that were like, Rosen has all the tools. And you and I have talked about this, but, like, tools are great. To a certain degree, though, they only go so far.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, the longer and longer we go on, we learn that Josh Rosen's kind of just a dick. And doesn't, like, yeah, he has all the tools, but, like, he just casts blame on everybody else. And so he's mad about his offensive line and his talent in Arizona and in Miami. But, I mean, the dude was just on the 49ers, like, is a backup. Like, I'm sorry, that team is loaded with talent, and he couldn't make it.
I just realized who Josh Rosen is. He's the quarterback version of Hugh Jackson.
Yeah, no, exactly.
He blames everybody around him, takes zero accountability for himself.
Well, that was who Hugh wanted, I think. If I'm remembering that right, there was an article that I think Hugh's top choice was Josh Rosen.
Oh, God, but that would have been one hell of a pairing.
I'm pretty sure there was somebody in the Browns organization, I think it was Hugh, who had Josh Rosen as their top choice. There was somebody, because there was a whole article about it after Baker's rookie year.
Let's see. Just doing a little search while we're here.
Yeah.
I remember that Rosen said he did not want to be taken by the Browns.
Right, and then Hugh Jackson said that, like, it's too early to comment, and then he said he feels good about the comments. Yeah, I don't. Oh yeah, and Hugh Jackson in February Rosen was saying he'd happily play for the Browns.
Oh yeah, okay, here we go. Dorsey was not a fan of Rosen. Hey, Dorsey did something right in the quarterback scouting department. Jackson explained his view on Rosen. Here we go. Very smart, precision passer. Looks like the guy that you want to put back there to throw the football anywhere you want to. Well, no, you don't.
Yeah, Matt Miller said in the lead up to the draft that Hugh Jackson's top pick is Josh Rosen.
Oh, good Lord.
So,
thank God we can let him have full power.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, for as critical as we are of Baker, like, honestly, out of those, like, I feel like there was, like, 4 possible options at quarterback at that spot, which were Rosen, Darnold, Baker, and Josh Allen. And I think everybody at this point would rather have Josh Allen. But everybody also would rather have Baker compared to Darnold and Rosen. Like, by far.
Yeah, out of the 4 that were the possibilities, because as talented and as great as Lamar Jackson's been so far, he wasn't really in consideration for the number 1 pick.
No, he would never. If he was that pick, Dorsey would have gotten fired.
Oh, yeah, and Hugh Jackson would have destroyed him. So that's also another.
Right. Yeah.
So, but out of the 4 that were actually in contention, so that'd be Baker, Rosen, Allen, Darnold. Rosen was the 3rd guy on that list for me, but that's just I did not care for Sam Darnold at all.
No, you and I both. Yeah, I remember we talked about this. I think it was before I even started coming on your pod, or before we started podding together. But yeah. I think it was just on Twitter, and we both were saying, like, if you look at, like, those interception numbers, that was terrifying.
Yeah, I remember at the time before he was drafted 1, but I remember when the Jets drafted him. I was on a radio show. Shout out Memphis Spence, and I was like, yeah, the Jets took Sam Darnold because apparently they want Mark Sanchez 2.0, and that's who basically Sam Darnold's been. He's basically been Mark Sanchez.
I mean, like, the most consistent thing we know from a data perspective that translates from college to pro is accuracy in a clean pocket.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I really kind of think that when you see Sam Darnold with like a 52% accuracy percentage from a clean pocket in college, there should be alarm bells going off about this dude's ability to succeed in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Like he can't. He's not. I don't understand. Like everybody's like, oh, they drafted Baker because he was a winner. Like no. Like I'm sorry. There was like a legitimate argument you could make about why Baker should be number one. The guy that got drafted because he was a winner, quote unquote, was Sam Darnold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the guy.
Because it was all intangibles with that dude. It was like, no, this guy has it. Okay, what is it? You'll know it when you see it.
That was the explanation for Sam Darnold. I'm just like, I never got the love with Sam Darnold. I never got the infatuation people had. I'm like, guys, this guy's gonna suck. He's gonna be bad. Nobody wanted to listen to me. Apparently.
What I will say, about the Baker pick too is I don't know that Josh Allen would have been able to succeed in Cleveland like he has in Buffalo. Like
that's fair.
Buffalo drafted him with a really good setup around him,
mm-hmm.
and he was given total time to learn because the team around him was good. So he could be bad, and that team was still winning.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had a lot of like ability to develop. And I think Baker would have ended up better if he was drafted into that system too. So don't get me wrong. But
yeah, I agree.
I think Josh Allen probably looks a bit more similar to what Baker looked like last year if the Browns drafted him,
mm-hmm.
and vice versa.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a fair point. I mean, the relative instability, or I'm not going to say relative, the complete instability of the Browns franchise through Baker's first couple seasons has definitely not helped them, and it's very possible for someone who was so much a project like Josh Allen was that it could have just crumbled immediately.
I agree.
So, as much as we like to, as much as I'd like to be like, hey, Josh Allen was my guy and he's been the best quarterback out of this class, I also recognize that Cleveland could have broken him.
Yeah, and that's kind of hot. Like, yeah. To give credit to Baker, nobody can say that guy isn't resilient.
Oh, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I again, do I love Baker? If it were up to me, would I sign Baker to an extension? Probably not at this point. I need another year to see, and even then, I would be much more looking for kind of like that $30 million a year deal instead of the 40. But do I also recognize Baker is a good enough pick that even if the Browns overpay him, there's a reason why he's getting a second contract? Yeah, that's fair. Not saying that I want them to. I'm just he would it was him or Josh Allen to me, and I think for both guys, as you just said, the instability of the Browns organization is currently, I mean, not really anymore, but was at that point a wild card.
Yeah. Little Browns camp update. Apparently, all the media members there were playing a game called Find Freddy Kitchens.
He seems like a hard guy to miss on a football field.
From this picture, where I'm looking, it's not easy.
Really?
Yeah, I've sent it to you. I know, great podcast, great audio content, but I'm going to hit the retweet button on this. So anyone who follows me can play the game along as well. But not easy to find him in that picture. But with that being said, I think this is a great time to go into our favorite news segment, Guys or Dudes, and it's defensive back edition. Okay. So let's get this one right off the top, right out of the way. Denzel Ward, that's a dude.
Dude, easy. Not as easy as JOK. No, actually, probably easier than JOK. But yeah, he's a dude.
Yeah, certified dude. Not even a question about it.
What people need to realize, when Denzel Ward is healthy, it is tough to find a cornerback you would rather have in coverage outside of Jalen Ramsey. Ward is so good in man coverage. Don't forget, last year in the playoffs against the Chiefs, they put him on Travis Kelce.
Yeah.
Travis Kelce's 4 times Denzel Ward's size. And I know he had a good game, but Kelce had better games in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me is incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Denzel Ward, that's a dude.
Yep.
You know, put it in pen. Put it if this was March Madness time, Sharpie, whatever you want to do. Denzel Ward, that's a dude. Um, Continuing along corners, Troy Hill. This one's one I'm kind of wrestling with a little bit.
I want to see him this year. So Troy Hill. So, and we'll talk about him soon. But like, unlike John Johnson, Troy Hill, somebody I'm not sure if he just really benefited from Staley and the outside talent, or if he really is as good of a slot corner as he looked like last year. If he is, he's a dude. If he's not, then I think he's like a good guy, but he's a guy.
So where I have him currently is guy with dude potential, but I have to see how he plays in Cleveland versus Los Angeles.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that's too much of a stretch.
I guess I would say like mine is like the opposite. He's a dude with guy potential to me.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I think we're in the same area.
It was the same idea. It could go either way.
Yeah.
All right, Ronnie Harrison.
You go first on this one.
I'm gonna go sneaky dude.
Okay, that's what I was gonna say too. I think he's a dude. I actually think Ronnie Harrison is a really good safety.
I think he's a good player, but I think he's sneaky dude because when you're going through the guys in the Browns secondary, how many guys do you name before you get to Ronnie Harrison?
Right. No, I agree. I guess to me, like, I think Ronnie Harrison can probably be had on a cheap extension. Mm-hmm. And I think the Browns are going to do that probably sooner than later.
Especially considering the news with Mr. Grant Delpit.
Yeah. I think, listen, Ronnie Harrison does kind of more of that hybrid, like strong safety linebacker thing. He's not necessarily the guy you'd most want out there in coverage. Mm-hmm. But he is like really good at taking on a tight end or rushing the passer or stopping the running back after the running back breaks through the first layer of the defense. Like, he's kind of a really good all-around player. I like Ronnie Harrison.
I do too.
I don't think he has any major weaknesses.
I agree with that. He's not someone where I'm just like, oh, you can't have him do this because he can't do that, or he's terrible at this. Offenses will attack him this way. I don't really see that with him. Mm-hmm. I agree. I'm not being like, yo, this guy is awesome for this, this, and this either. That's why I said sneaky dude, because I'm like, he's good, but like, he's not like certified dude, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's fair to me. Like, I also just think the position he plays maybe more than anything be kind of why we think that, right? Like, he's outstanding at what he does. It's just the position is not as valuable as it once was.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely. So let's go to his other safety, his little partner in the back of the defensive secondary, and that's John Johnson, the third. Dude. Without question.
Yeah, dude. Browns fans are going to be amazed at how good a good safety looks on defense.
Yeah, I mean, this is dude in all caps. Put it on a billboard.
Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah, no. Browns fans are going to be stunned with just how much like a good safety can transform a defense.
I mean, he's probably like one of the 2 or 3 best safeties that rosters had since they've come back.
Dude, he may be one of the 2 or 3 best safeties in the NFL.
I mean, there's not just that, but I'm just talking about, Browns history. Since they've been back.
I can't think of a safety where I'm like, he was better than how John Johnson looked last year.
I mean, the only guys you could really throw into the mix are, TJ Ward, but I think he's better than TJ Ward.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Robert Griffith, when he played here, but that was towards the end of his career, but he was still a good player. You could also throw in Earl Little, Sean Jones guys, but...
I mean, all those guys are good, don't get me wrong. Yeah. Like, John Johnson's an all-pro safety.
Yeah.
Like, again, the one thing about John Johnson is he played on that Rams defense last year that was just so talented with such a great defensive coordinator. But John Johnson, Jalen Ramsey, and Aaron Donald, to me, were the 3 guys that made that defense roll. And while we don't have a Jalen Ramsey, while we don't have an Aaron Donald, I think Denzel Ward does a little bit different than Ramsey did, but I think he could become the Ramsey role, right? Where like he's not just on one guy the whole game.
Hmm.
He goes and like guards different guys. I think Myles Garrett, if he really wants to win Defensive Player of the Year, which it sounds like he does,
Hmm.
is going to have to perform like Aaron Donald did last year.
Yeah,
And so I think John Johnson could be that pillar again.
I think he can definitely help in his quest for that. I still think it's a bit of an uphill battle.
It is. But I mean, John. I don't know. Even given that kind of like, listen, it may have just been the defense he was on last year kind of question. I don't think so. I think John Johnson is just an incredible safety. I could not believe it when we got him as a
Yeah,
free agent.
I think the what defense he was on for John Johnson is a lot less applicable to him than it is to possibly Troy Hill.
Right, because he was calling the plays.
Yes.
Like right. Let's just be honest about his role on that defense. Like he
Hmm.
was that defense's quarterback.
Yeah. So let's go to the other corner. Greedy Williams, he's a guy. Really.
He's a guy. He's a guy. Again, if he can play any snaps this season, which it looks like he can, we lucked out. But he missed too much due to injury, and I think the nerve damage in his shoulder will make it impossible for him to become the player who his potential suggested he could be when he was drafted.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Absolutely. Not even like, not even questioning it. Not even gonna argue. Not even gonna be like, it's
Yep.
like we've talked about before. Nerve damage in a shoulder, not good.
Nope.
I mean, there's a reason he missed
Bad.
an entire year last year.
Right. And I don't forget, like, one of his big things coming out of college was that he was really good at like getting interceptions and forcing turnovers in general.
Mm-hmm.
With nerve damage to your right shoulder, like, that doesn't go away. You just can recover from it, but
Mhm.
it's there. Like, I don't think he's ever going to be able to do that again.
Probably not. I would love for him to do so, but
Yeah.
I'm looking at it at this point. He was very shaky as a rookie. He was injured as a rookie, wasn't he? As well.
Yeah, he missed about half that season, I think.
Yeah, and then he missed all last year. It's just it's similar to Grant Delpit's situation. At some point, you've missed too much time.
Yep.
Because of injury.
Yep.
The only difference between
Especially in those early years, right? Because that's when you develop, right? So
Yeah.
now the Browns just drafted Greg Newsome.
Yeah,
Why are they going to spend time teaching Greedy how to do these things when that time could be spent on Newsome?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't draft Greg Newsome because they want him to be behind Greedy. It's, no, this is your replacement in case you don't work out, which we have a feeling you won't.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. I actually think I don't even think the caveat at the end is like, I think this was meant to be the guy they thought Greedy could be when he was drafted.
Yeah,
Right. He
absolutely.
is Greedy's replacement.
He is. Absolutely. Going down a few more guys. Grant Delpit, I don't know what to do with him. He hasn't played a single snap. He's played, 10 snaps in practice over 2 years, so...
I mean, honestly, we could still give Delpit the rookie treatment. Like,
We can.
we don't know what he is.
I guess that's the fairest thing to do in this whole exercise. Yeah. Shelter Gredwine, he's a guy.
I mean, yeah. Given where he was drafted, it's like, what's lower than a guy? Like, somebody, just a person.
Somebody.
Yeah,
guy, dude, or somebody.
There were plays last year where Sendejo had to go literally to the and listen, I'm not a Sendejo fan, but again, Sendejo wasn't making the mental mistakes. He was just covering for Carl Joseph and Sheldrick Redwine being complete dumbasses.
Thank God that Carl Joseph isn't here. I hated that signing when they made it.
You want to know something scary?
Hmm.
I would have Carl Joseph 10 times out of 10 over Sheldrick Redwine.
That's disgusting because Carl Joseph was a disaster.
It is, but it's true.
Yeah. And by the way, again, kudos to me for calling how that was going to play out exactly.
You did. You really did.
He was going to be bad in pass coverage. He'd be better in run coverage, and he's going to miss like third of the games. And
yep, and that's exactly what happened.
All right, Greg Newsome, he's a rookie. He hasn't done anything explosive or eye-popping like JOK yet, so we can't give him like a dude or guy status yet.
He was good in week 1, but he was not like eye-poppingly good.
It wasn't like, holy shit, look at this guy. It was just like, yeah, you did good.
He was good. He did exactly what we wanted him to. He will play a lot of snaps this year.
Absolutely.
He's a rookie.
AJ Green. I want you to go first on this one.
I am going to say guy with dude potential, and given his role on the team, I think it's like Porter Gustin to me. Like a dude in his role, kind of.
Okay, yeah, I'm with you on that. Because what we've seen out of him, it's been impressive. I don't think really anyone saw this coming from him, really. So, and again, I think you put it perfectly. Given his role, he is a dude in his role. But he's not necessarily a dude, period.
Yeah, he's the 5th cornerback.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, to a certain degree, I'm kind of just like, he may be the 4th cornerback, right? He may be higher than Greedy.
I think he is, if you wanted my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, so he's the 4th cornerback? Like, good for him. Undrafted.
Mm-hmm. I'd definitely put him...
he was actually all right when he had to play last year.
He was. And, from everything that we've heard, I mean, again, it's only training camp, preseason, and practice and stuff, but everything I've heard and read has been just, just been nothing but praise, really, for him.
Yeah. Yeah. No, he's looked good every time he's played, and really, as a Brown, whether it be actual NFL game, training camp, or preseason.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, I mean, he's definitely making the roster, and he reminds me of a Terrence Mitchell.
Okay, yeah.
In the sense that I could see AJ Green being a guy that has like a 10-plus year career in the NFL, just because he can do anything you would ever want from a cornerback. He won't excel at anything. You would never really want him as your pendant starter, but he will be a great backup.
Like jack of all trades, master of none.
Exactly. Like, people forgot how good Terrence Mitchell was for us. Like, he didn't miss a game.
Yeah, Terrence Mitchell was a very valuable part of the secondary.
Yeah,
I think that looking back, I think that's a pretty good comparison for what AJ Green could possibly be. But Javonte Moffett, guy.
yeah. Again, the only reason he would ever make the roster is because the guy he was competing against is Sheldrick Redwine.
Yep. Richard LeCount, he's a rookie. MJ Stewart, he's a guy. He's not good.
No. Browns fans love him because what he did in the end of the season / playoffs when we just had so many injuries. But
he's just a guy.
Yeah, he's a guy. I think right now he's one of those guys playing for his contract on another team.
Yeah, probably.
I don't think they bring 7 cornerbacks.
No, I don't either. That's a little excessive. Because once you get down to that far on the cornerback thing, those guys are usually the guys you call up off the practice squad or sign off the street or trade for.
Exactly.
Some guys you're stashing on the back end of your depth chart because you need those guys. There's a couple other guys on the roster here. Brian Allen, Elijah Benton, Robert Jackson. Those are just a collection of guys.
Robert Jackson may stay on the roster because of special teams, but otherwise I think Brian Allen, Elijah Benton, and MJ Stewart are all probably going to get cut.
Yeah, and here's a guy who I was not even aware he was on the roster. Emmanuel Rugamba. It's a rookie. Never heard of him.
Yeah, he's paying. He clearly is playing for playing time in the preseason.
Yeah, that's what he is. He's maybe a guy that's about a practice squad somewhere, but listen, I'm looking at a depth chart here. He is the lone guy in the 5th group of defensive backs on the depth chart. So that's all you really need to know there. Yeah. But that would be guys or dudes. I think it's pretty clear cut for most of these players.
Yeah. I mean, to me, and I'm interested in your take on this, I think the starting secondary is great.
Yes.
My concern is with depth, which it was my concern last year. And it's still my concern. I still think the depth is a little weak there.
I mean, yeah, the depth last year was concerning. Depth this year still concerning as well. But I will say the starting group, I am much more confident in than I ever was last year.
Yeah. Well, and I would say like the depth is still like a little bit better. Like,
It is,
but
but
to me, it's the safety is the question. Is like who is if Delpit's not really ready to play until midseason, which given he'll miss the rest of the preseason, I think the first week or two of the regular season, like I think it's very likely he's not ready to go until midseason. And so my question then is like, are you starting a 5th-round pick rookie if John Johnson gets hurt?
yeah.
Or are you going to really piss off sections of Brown's Twitter and go 4 linebacker?
Oh, that'd be wonderful. Interesting side note, nice little practice update here. Apparently, Tack McKinley's back with the team.
That's good because he'd been hurt or not hurt.
He was
because
he
we don't
was
actually know what was going on.
He was away from the team for a while, but he's at the facility apparently. So that could be, I guess, some good news for as far as depth on the defensive line is concerned.
Right now, Porter Gustin to me is the backup end. So McKinley's competing for like that second spot as a backup.
Yeah, I'm probably with you there. But any final thoughts here?
No, man, I'm excited for Sunday. I guess we'll just review it on Monday then.
Yeah, it should be interesting. Again, I not that the game's going to tell us a whole hell of a lot, but it could give us a little bit of insight to a little bit of the evolution of the offense that the Browns might be doing.
And who the new kicker is going to be, whether it's going to be Cody Parkey or Chase McLaughlin.
Here's a take. The kicker for the Browns this season currently isn't on the roster. That's my take.
I totally believe that.
Because, man, if we got to go into the season with Cody Parkey or the McLaughlin guy, it's can we not kick the extra point and just go for 2 every time?
Well, don't forget, like, Stefanski did that a decent chunk last year, and everybody's like, oh, he's so aggressive. I'm like, listen, I think Stefanski has some, like, steel cojones on him, but part of that also was just that, like, who am I sending out there to kick that extra point or to kick even, like, the field goal, right? Like,
yeah.
Because, honestly, it's probably more worth it to go for it on 4th and 1 or 4th and 2.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's how... What it really says is just a lack of faith in the kicker, and I don't blame them. I think Parkey's long field goal last year was 46 yards.
No, I mean, listen, Cody Parkey is what he's always been. Everybody's like, oh, Cody Parkey said, like, Cody Parkey doesn't suck. He's fine. He doesn't. He cannot kick long field goals, period. Mm-hmm. And he's really, generally speaking, like, has awful inaccuracies at the worst times.
Yes, most
handle pressure well.
Most commonly in the form of doinks.
Yeah, he does not handle pressure well.
Well, I think part of his issue is that he trains to kick at the uprights, and when he trains,
yeah, which is very strange.
Which is insane. You're a kicker. You're supposed to go through.
Here's my prediction. I think Cody Parkey wins the job in camp. I think we go into the season, and I think we lose to the Chiefs. I think kind of overall the start of the season is a little shaky. Like, I think we beat Houston. Mm-hmm. I think we probably beat Chicago. I think then it gets tough, right? Then you have Minnesota, the Rams, Cardinals, Broncos, and then Steelers. I think we could be slightly above 500 by the end of that Steelers game. And if you want my prediction, I think the Browns lose the Steelers game because Parkey missed a 30-yard field goal to win it.
That sounds so.
And I think they cut him and signed somebody else.
That sounds like it's just gonna happen.
I mean, like, I'm looking at the schedule, right? We lose to the Chiefs. I think we could go on a small winning streak. I would be shocked if we beat the Chargers in LA.
Same.
I think that team's gonna be really good. For whatever reason, the Cardinals seem to have our number. Broncos is a Thursday night game. Baker tends to perform well in those, so I think we beat them. And then we have the Steelers, and I think we lose that. So 3 losses through week 8, which isn't terrible.
No, it's not.
And then I actually think the schedule gets a lot easier. So I think that's when they cut Cody Parkey and bring somebody else in.
I'm with you there. And with that, with, good old-fashioned kicker talk, I think that's going to end it here. A reminder, like I said at the beginning, subscribe, like, share, tell your friends. It's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, SoundCloud. This is Believeland and RealBrownsFans.com. Remember, if you don't share, like, subscribe, tell your friends or family it's stealing, and that's not cool. And that will do it for us. Thank you for listening.